Good morning. We intend for this to be a weekly short Bible study that you can watch at the comfort of your desk, at work, or at home. This is the same Bible study that we teach at our pastor's class on Wednesday morning and at our men's breakfast Thursday morning, just without the discussion. And we've been working on the Gospel of Mark in this Bible study, and we are on the 4th chapter of Mark, verses 21 to 41 is where we are working today. And so first, we want to catch you up where you haven't been yet. The first 4 chapters of Mark have Jesus in a very fast, frenetic pace, announcing that the kingdom of God has drawn near. He proclaims this. He tells people to listen to this. And listening in Mark means hearing and understanding and changing your life because of it, not just hearing. And so Jesus says, listen to my proclamation. And his proclamation isn't just his words, it's also his deeds. He not only says that the lame will walk, he heals people who are crippled. He not only says that demons will be scattered, he scatters demons. He not only says that people find their place, he finds place for people. And this is the word that Jesus just keeps on sharing, the word that the kingdom of God is drawn near, and it's drawn near in Jesus's physical body. At the beginning of chapter 4, we get the first teaching of Jesus. And the first teaching of Jesus is a very familiar parable that you might have heard before, of seeds being scattered about. And some of the seeds land on a trail, and birds come and eat it up because there's nothing for the seed to grow into. Some of it grow into rocks, and they start to grow in those rocks, but the sun comes out and it scorches and kills it. And some of it grows in a place where it could grow, but then weeds come up and choke it out. And the fourth grows in good soil. And Jesus explains that this parable is like the word. Sometimes the word lands in a place where it just will never grow. That's that trail. And those could be people who aren't of a mind to hear the Christian message of the kingdom of God drawing near. It could be people who have heard that message from a broken source, like a pastor who's abused them, or a church that broke up because of craziness, and then the others go on from there. People have heard the word, but they have something happen in their life that takes them away from the faith. And so the word dies with their movement away from the faith, like a divorce or an addiction or a childhood tragedy or something. And fourth, it's just good soil. So now when we get to 21, we start to see Jesus build on this central parable of the sower throwing out these seeds, and the seeds being the good word, the proclamation that we're to listen to, that the kingdom of God is drawn near. And Jesus builds on that with 2 proverbs and 2 short parables. And I'm going to read these and explain these in the next few minutes. So Jesus said to them, "It is as if a lamp is brought in to put under the bushel basket or under the bed, and not on the lampstand. For there is nothing hidden except to be disclosed, nor is anything secret except to come to light. Let anyone with ears hear and listen." So we got this listen again, that hear this and then change your life with it. And it's a simple sort of proverb, that we don't light a lamp and bring it into a room and then put a bushel basket over it, right? The purpose of the lamp is for it to be bright in the area. And we don't light a lamp, bring it into a room, and put it underneath a bed. We put it on a lampstand. Why would you put it underneath a bed? Not only would you catch that tick on fire of straw that's likely the bed, it's not doing the purpose. Now, usually when we read this proverb, and it's used in Matthew and Luke too, we think of Jesus being the light of the world. But here, because it's connected to that sower of the seed, the light is actually this word. You've been given this word to share in the world. It's not a secret thing. It's not as if we've got some sort of wisdom as Christians that we don't want to share with anybody. It's something that's to be spread out in the world. That's its intention. Don't hide it. Share it. Share it. Share it. You now are the sowers of the seed. Keep throwing these seeds out into the world. And then he goes on in verse 24. Pay attention to what you hear. The measure you give will be the measure you get, and still more will be given you. For to those who have, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. And again, we have this idea of the word being something that's given to us with the intention that we share it. And these proverbs that Jesus uses, scholars think that they might have been proverbs that already existed that had to do with money. Because if you listen to them, they sound like they make a lot of sense for money. And they sound like the kind of things we say today, because the economics of the world, unfortunately, doesn't change. Those who have more end up accumulating more, and those who have less end up accumulating less. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Not always true by any stretch of the imagination, but a proverb that's kind of said today too. But Jesus uses these economic proverbs, and instead he's talking about the word. And he says to them, listen again, make this change your life. The measure you give will be the measure you get, and still more will be given to you. So the more seeds of the word that you get, the more you are to spread. And once you are all out, your basket is empty or your bag is empty of seed, we'll give you more seed. It's not going to end. There is an unending supply of proclamation that you can do in your life. As much as you have time to share, you will be given the seeds, the words, and the deeds, and the opportunities to share. And so then, verse 25, the more of you that are given, the more that you're given, the more you're going to see the results of that. And this seems to be in two different ways, right? The more that you're given, the more that you're going to be able to share. And those seeds, some of them are going to find good soil. No matter how miserable you are at sharing this proclamation, eventually some of that's going to work, and some of that's going to find good soil. So keep on throwing it out, because you will see the results eventually. And the results are going to be people drawing closer to God around you. People's lives being changed because of what you've done, right? So I work at Heart Food Pantry, and I don't know what those few hours of good work do, what the ripples of that is. If I provide food for one mother with her child now focuses better in class, and he becomes a better student, and that means that he gets in less trouble, and his grades go up. You can just see the ripples go out from this one seed, this action of the kingdom of God, of those who are hungry being fed. And that's what we can count on. And then for those who have nothing, it'll be taken away. Think back on our sower of the seed, where the seed lands on a road, right? It's just going to lie on that road till eventually a bird comes up and eats it up. The longer you hold your sack of seeds, your word that you're not sharing, they just dry up, and they're no longer healthy enough to be thrown in good soil. They are taken away, not because God's given up on you, but because you have no more ammunition. The less you surround yourself with people of the word, the more you're going to dry up as a seed yourself, and not feel as though you have anything to share that is of God with the world. Moving on, verse 26. And he said, the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter the seed on the ground, and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow, and he does not know how. The earth produces of itself first a stalk, and then a head, and then a full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest has come. This is a short parable, and whenever we read parables, what we want to find is the surprise. There's all sorts of metaphors in here that we can say, oh, this means that, and this means that, and that's kind of fun to do, but it loses the purpose of the parable. And the purpose of a parable is to teach a lesson, and that lesson is singular, but that doesn't mean it's the last lesson or last word. It's just a lesson that we're to hear. And the surprise in this parable is that this farmer, even though he doesn't even know how seeds work, he's surprised that there's a stalk and then a head and then a grain. Who knew, right? Well, any farmer knows this, but this farmer is maybe especially new at the craft, let's say. Even that farmer throws out the seed and is surprised at all the harvest that he has. And that's the purpose of spreading this word, is the harvest that eventually comes, the fruit that comes. So he throws out the seed, and he goes to bed night and day, and he comes out, and before you know it, he's got enough things to harvest in the world. And so the surprise that even this farmer who doesn't know what he's doing manages a good harvest is a good word for us. That don't be so focused on what happens once you throw out the seed. Be more focused on constantly throwing out the seed. Throw it out. Throw it out. Proclaim that the kingdom of God is drawn near. Tell people about Jesus that has come near. Proclaim indeed. Do those things that right a broken world, because that's proclaiming that the kingdom of God is drawn near. And don't worry whether you're changing lives or whether anyone's even listening to you. Be faithful in throwing out the seed and trust that God will help some of it find good soil and you'll have a harvest. And the final parable, the most famous of all these parables. And he said, with what can we compare the kingdom of God, or what parable will we use for it? It is like a mustard seed, which when sown upon the ground is the smallest of seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and it puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. This is probably called a simile, something that was said common. Like we would say, oh, he's the runt of the litter. We mean he's the smallest one in the classroom, a runt being a reference to a dog litter of dogs and the smallest dog, right? As soon as we say runt of the litter, we know what that means. When Jesus said the mustard seed is the smallest of the seed, it is like that. That was probably something that they said, oh, geez, you're as small as a mustard seed in Jesus' day. Okay, so we have this small seed, and we want to look for the surprise in the parable, and the surprise is really obvious here, right? That the smallest of seed becomes the greatest of shrubs. That out of this little tiny thing, this shrub blows up. And so what does that tell us about the kingdom of God? Is that you have no idea what your proclamation of the word does, what your sharing of the kingdom of God drawing near does. You have no idea the ripples and ripples and ripples and ripples that happen in the midst of this. So just trust that God is going to do great things with what you're doing. And you can move that out. You have no idea what the ministry of your church that's responsible for that few blocks in the universe is doing for the rest of the universe. The ripples that is happening. Martin Luther King went to a church at one day that raised him as any other pastor's son in that church, and yet he impacted the world a large part by the faithful ministry of that church. You don't know what's going to happen. That God has great plans for these small seeds. So trust that God can do great things with just the little things that you're able to do and impact in the world. And a couple other things that I think we don't want to lose. Jesus says that the shrub then becomes a place of shade for the birds to nest. And what that reminds me of is just how God has an intentionality about the universe, how it's supposed to work, that shrubs provide a place for birds, and birds eat those seeds, and then they poop them out, and other shrubs are made that provide other places for birds, and the cycle of shelter and comfort for the world and food happens all on its own if we just sit back and trust that God is in the midst of it and do those faithful things that draw people to God. And finally, the last thing I want to say about this parable is this idea that Jesus doesn't say this small seed becomes the largest oak in the whole world. The seed becomes a shrub. That the church at its best is good ground cover for the world. Kingdoms worry about building the biggest building in all of the city. We got the Washington Monument that shoots up into the sky, right? As a way of saying how powerful we are in the world. But the kingdom of God just worries about spreading out and covering the world in a way that fits in with God's plan for the universe. Not that we can build huge buildings out of these shrubs, but that we can provide homes for animals. And the cycle could continue. There's something real powerful in that humble sort of vision of what the church could be at its best. That I think as we build mega churches and grieve our churches aren't growing like they should, that we just need to take a breath and say, okay, God's got this. We just need to be faithful in our proclamation that the kingdom of God is drawn near.